So welcome. We're going to start with a longer layered haircut first. The most popular haircut on the planet is that long concave layer. And it's generally done one of two ways. It's either done working through the top, the front area here, lifting everything up and away from the outline and all the way in the back, or it's brought everything forward onto this nice arch or face framing layers. Now, if you analyze what that haircut does, what that shape does, it basically means that all the weight is removed from the front and all the weight is left in the back. Now, if you analyze the hairline, what you'll notice is we have more density that's in the back because the hairline is much lower than we do in the front. So basically what you're doing when you do that haircut is you're cutting a mullet. And a mullet is lighter in the front, longer and heavier in the back. So it becomes a challenge to basically get any kind of movement through here. A layer is a removal of weight. It creates bounce. It creates, a freedom within the texture. But if it's left too heavy, gravity pulls it down. So what you find yourself doing in that salon situation is getting about 5 round brushes and coming in at it and kind of getting like a Jedi, trying to get any form of lift and body into that back, rolling that round brush in, then getting another one and doing the same thing. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to change that for you. I'd like to show you a different approach of this haircut. So instead of starting at the front and in the top, we're going to actually start in the back. One of the most complementary shapes on the human being head and face is triangular. That means it descends from the back towards the front. If you look at the jawline, we're angled that way. If you look at the cheekbones, we're angled that way. The bridge of the nose is angled that way. The forehead is angled that way. The top of the lip is angled that way. So it really kind of falls into flow with the face a little bit stronger and better than, let's say, a round shape. A round shape is going to really open up the face. And sometimes you don't want to open up the face. You kind of want to keep that face leaner. So the sectioning for the haircut, what I've done is I've sectioned off in the center of the head, right through the crown. To find that, what I do is actually just put the comb right there in the middle of the crown and let you work with the natural contour of the head shape. Then what I've done is I've sectioned from the occipital, that next round of the head down, to the top of the ears, right through here. So what we've got is there we go, basically the crown where I'm going to start. It's a removal of weight. So I'm going to remove the weight first and then I'm going to work to the outline second. So instead of starting on the outline, which really makes it very all about the outline, if I come in and put a strong outline in there, it then limits what I can do on the inside because I'm trying to control that strength of that outline. Remember that layering is a removal of weight, so it makes the outline weaker. I don't want to protect a really strong outline. What I want to protect is the length. So I'm actually not going to start there. I'm going to start on the inside, and then I'll work to that length afterwards. So first we're going to establish the layering, and we're going to start on the interior here. Okay, so starting on the interior, I'm going to take this out. What I will do is I'm going to take that clip and really just protect the underneath so that keeps it out of the way, so it doesn't get in your way. What I'm going to do is come through and take vertical section right in the center. Now, there is a reason why I'm going to stand here and work this way. I'm going to stand here and work on the outside of my fingers. The outside of the fingers will always enable me to lift the hair. The inside of my fingers enables me to pull the hair down more. It's just a natural way of how my arm works. Now, the reason why I'm going to stand here with my fingertips pointed down is because of that movement that I get. I'm able to cut a very curved line, basically that follows the curvature of the head shape. If I was to come and stand on this side and work on the outside of my fingers from here, what's going to happen is I'm probably going to take it shorter here and leave it longer here. In haircutting, it's very simple. Whatever you do, there's a result. So what it is it's finding out what those results are. All those what ifs. What if I stood here? What if I stood there? What if I lifted here? And so on and so on. So my first section, what I'm going to do is pull that 90 degrees, which is straight out from the head. And what I'm doing is I'm directing the hair straight back to this wall over here. So I'm using straight out elevation and over direction to begin with. I make the layers about the size of my comb. It's a longer comb. And I'm going to follow the curvature of the head shape. I have to make sure that everything in this section gets elevated to 90 degrees so that I don't leave this corner at the top. That corner is that peak of weight that you're point cutting out at the end of the haircut once you've blow dried. So the idea is to actually just establish the haircut in its most perfect form so that you don't have to kind of rip it apart with the too much point cutting. My next section, same thing. I'm going to comb on the side of the section that I'm about to cut and not what I've already cut. If I do comb where the guide is, I actually move the guide off its base, so I move it away from me. If I do that, I then cut the next section shorter than the guide, so that would be a mistake. So I always want to keep combing the side that I'm about to cut. Then I'm either the same length or I'm getting longer. Now, I want the haircut to get heavier towards the front, right? But I have options. I can overdirect everything into that first section. That's going to make it the heaviest it's going to be. Then the least amount of overdirection would be to overdirect into the previous 2 into 1, 3 into 2, 4 into 3, and so on. That's going to be the least amount. It's going to get heavier, but I'll probably lose all the length and weight through the front. So I'm going to pick like a happy medium. Overdirection is just like elevation, so I've got to find a degree or a place to send the hair to. What I will do is I'm just going to send the hair straight back. It's kind of like when you lift everything straight up to the ceiling, not into the middle, straight up, but now I'm just going to pull it straight back. Kind of like pulling out your sock drawer or whatever, something like that. So my second section now with the first, going straight back. And there's the guide. Again, making sure that everything is elevated straight out from the head so that I don't leave too much weight in the crown. Next section, same thing. All I'm doing is sending the section and the previous section straight back. So what's happening here is I'm cutting what we call a convex layer. Basically, it follows the vertical contour of the head shape. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating that nice soft layer that falls in the interior. So this is the shortest part of the haircut. Everything else is going to get longer from here. Next section, same thing. Basically, I have a stationary guide now because I'm at the round of the head right here. So I'm just going to bring everything into that. And again, pull straight back. One thing that you're going to have to be aware of is what your feet are doing. What controls where I overdirect the hair is actually this right leg here. Basically, if I'm stood too far over here, I'm going to overdirect the hair this way. Okay? If I put it level, I'm going to overdirect the hair straight there. If I move forward a little bit, I'm going to overdirect too far forward over here. So it's very important to understand what your feet do within the haircut. My last section, same exact thing, just adding to what we've already done and overdirecting it straight back. So, now that we've done that, I want to cross-check it. Cross-checking is to check the opposite dimension than what you were just creating. Actually, I was creating a three-dimensional object right there. I was physically cutting vertically, and I was moving the hair backwards to create this particular aspect of the haircut, what we call the horizontal dimension. So when I cross-check, that's what I'm cross-checking. Now, what a lot of people do when they cross-check is they tend to just pull the hair straight towards themselves. Now, if I just do that, when I look at this line, it's not within my standards whatsoever. And the reason for that, basically, is I didn't pull the hair there. I directed it straight back, but I pulled it 90 degrees. So I must check in the same place as where it was cut. And chances are, it's going to be clean. And I'll do that all the way through, pulling the hair 90 degrees. Cool. All right, so let's do the other side. Okay, moving into the second side. Again, isolating that underneath so it doesn't interfere. Taking my first section on this new side and taking the first section on the previous side for a guide. Now again, you want to comb on the side of the hair that you're about to cut, not what you've already cut. If I comb the guide, I'm going to move the guide over towards me. And what that's going to do is it's going to actually make it shorter because it's off its base. So again, the reason why I didn't move to the opposite side and I've stayed in the same position with my fingertips pointed down is so that I get this nice curvature. If you look at the outside of my fingers, that's what they do. They can curve very easily. If I use the inside of my fingers, they're much flatter. So I end up kind of cutting all these corners into it, kind of like a stop sign. Corners are a little bit of a kind of a problem if you don't need them. A lot of hairdressers are trained, if they see them, they just chop them off. A corner, when it's chopped off, doesn't disappear, it actually multiplies. So you end up putting corners all the way around the head. It's kind of like gremlins. So same thing, over-directing everything straight back. So what I've done is I've actually situated myself in the room like a box, basically. So everything I'm doing now, I'm level within the room. So I'm sending everything straight back towards you at the camera, all right? Again, combing the side I'm about to cut, not what I've already cut. Being very conscious as to where my feet are and what they're doing. If this leg here moves over here slightly forward, I'm going to over-direct the hair too much into the center. If I have my foot too far back, I'm not going to over-direct it enough and pull it out here. So what your hips do and your feet do is very, very important in the haircut as to over-direction. So I'm basically parallel to the mannequin head at the moment. Now, one of the biggest things that you could use to help you is a mirror. And right now, what I would be doing if I was in a situation in the salon, I'd have the mirror right here where you are, so that I can see exactly where I'm over-directing the hair to. Because when I look, all I see is that. Whatever's this way, I can see the angle of my fingers. I don't really know where I'm sending the hair to. So if I have the mirror, I can see that. And it's kind of really cool because it's like you're being filmed live. It's your chance where you can look outside of yourself and look at what you do. And it's almost like there's a GoPro in the mirror filming you, and you can watch yourself. I suggest you do it. It'll make a big, big difference. It's like having a teacher over your shoulder telling you, hey, no, move this way, move that way. Just makes it a lot more simple. Okay. So what you'll see in the flow of the weight of the layers is that it gets heavier towards the front. So now what we're going to do is we're going to connect the interior to the exterior. Okay, so connecting the exterior, taking a vertical section. Now if you notice now I'm stood on the opposite side of the head so that my fingertips actually point up instead of down. Now the benefit for that is what I do here now is I work from the layer to the length. So I can use the elbow to protect the length. If I was to be stood on the other side, then I'd be working from the length in. And I may cut that length off too short. And where I connect the layers together, I might create this inverted corner. And that's kind of a pain, because what that does then is it kind of gives you that lip on the haircut, which makes the underneath flick out too much. So that's why we're going to approach it this way. So first off, it's all about body position. I'm facing you. And what I will do is I'm going to put my palm to face me. I won't put the palm to face the head, because look what happens immediately when I do that. It makes me crouch over. It's not a comfortable position. Therefore, I'm not in control of the haircut. So what I do is my palm actually faces me. So basically, like this, I know that I can hit myself in the forehead. So what I do is I take the middle finger and the index finger, and I take that hair and I just move out to the layer. And I use my elbow to protect a greater length. So if I have a more extreme length, I just keep my elbow going up, 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 even higher. It's a great way of doing it. So what that does for me is it protects and keeps all the length. So it's the same as the interior as far as over direction. I'm going to be sending the hair straight back to this wall behind the mannequin. So when I'm combing the hair, what you'll notice is I'm using over the hand instead of kind of like a T-Rex. If I do this, it's all about my wrists, which equals carpal tunnel eventually. If I do it like this, I'm then using my elbows to actually do, and my shoulders to do it for me. So I'm using the right joints to help me cut the haircut. My over direction is exactly the same. Pulling everything straight back, combing the side of the section that I'm about to cut. Body position, exactly the same as before. I've got to watch what I'm doing with my feet so that I know I'm sending the hair to the right place. So unglue the elbow, lift the elbow up, and that will protect even more length. So you can see that it's protected the all-important length. Now that I've reached the round of the head, I basically have a stationary guide because I'm pulling all the hair straight back. So I can condense. I don't have to keep separating the hair once I get around the corner of the head. And that's a cool, a very important thing to understand is when to condense and when not to condense. If I have a traveling guideline, I can't condense. If I have a stationary guideline, I can make the sections as big as I want as long as I can see the guideline. So again, protecting all that length. Take the previous section on the other side, the guide, a new section on this new side. So again, placing the hair in between the fingers. And basically what I do is I slide my weight onto my left knee. And then I unglue the elbow and I can connect to the outline. So then I just continue in that manner. Straight back. If you feel that you're kind of like crouching over yourself a little too much, all you have to do is unglue the elbow and move over to where the hair is actually being cut. Don't stand so far forward because then you'll be cutting away from yourself. Anytime you're cutting away from yourself, you're losing control of the haircut. So I'm at the round of the head. I can basically send all of this straight back now. So that's condensing. And there we have the back. So we've protected the entire length of the haircut and layered the interior. So when we look at that, when we change the angle, what you'll notice is, so here we go. Now, instead of all of this density that was there before, kind of like a phone book on the back of your head, now you have this kind of shape in there. And look, the outline's nice and soft. So it's not got this strong outline that's going to limit all of that movement. You have to remember that layers bounce and graduation swings, and one length swings the line. So layers, it needs a freer outline sometimes so that it gets that movement. So now that we've done that, we're now going to connect into the front. Okay, so connecting the front into the back. Two different ways I could do that. I can work with vertical sections, and I can use over direction to pull that back into the crown. Or I can work horizontal sections and use elevation and finger angle to create that weight through into the front there. If I was to work vertically, I have to use over direction, pulling the hair back into here. So if you look at that, that's only so much space to over direct, so it's only going to get to a certain length. So when I'm working with longer hair, I need to have more protection than that. So instead of me working vertically and maybe cutting a hole through here, what I'm going to do is actually work horizontally and connect that. So my first section goes through the center and connects into the crown. And what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to take what I've done in the back, in the crown area, and extend that through. I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to get longer towards the hairline, just like I did here. So my first section is straight out from the head in the crown and straight up to the ceiling as far as the elevation. I'm going to take that and I'm just going to get longer towards the front. So the finger angle, and again the elbow, is protecting the length. Now this is always sometimes a challenge when people cut hair with elevation through the top here because of height, basically, not being able to reach it. So we see a lot of this cutting down in these elevations. Now you have to remember that you're a human being and you have to get all these thousands of hairs into your fingers, into the right elevation and the right over direction, and keep them perfect. When you move, that's not doing that. You're not locking it in. So it's very important that you understand that. So if you are having trouble with that elevation, you know, even I have a limit as to how high my elbow can go. I can just drop the elbow actually, and I can use my finger angle to cut that. So it gives me like another few inches of height, and that can kind of help you. So my second section, same as the first. So it's exactly like I was cutting the back, but instead of me pulling back to a wall, I'm actually pulling up to a ceiling now. So my elbow will control how long it gets. I'm at the round of the head now, going into the sides, so I can start to condense the haircut after this, because basically my guide is above the round of the head. So I can take all of this now and lift that up to that section at the round of the head. I'm going to do that on both sides. Taking the guide from the previous side and my new section on this side. I'm staying in the same position so that I can keep my elbow being the protector of the length and the weight through the front. I really don't like working into, like from the outline in on most haircuts. I like to work from the interior out. Again, comb the side of the section that you're about to cut. Straight up to the ceiling and cut that triangular line in. So continue it in this manner. So again, my elevation is straight up to the ceiling. Oops. Continuing all the way through. I'm at the round of the head now, so I can basically take everything that's below it and bring that in and straight up to the ceiling, because I have a stationary guideline that lives above the natural round of the head. And there we have a long concave layer. But what I'd like to do now is I'd like to show you how I face frame it. Okay, so now we're going to frame the front here and face framing layers. It's very important to figure out what the hair in the face is so that you don't layer too far back and push this length behind the shoulder. If the length goes behind the shoulder, it's disappeared from the front. So basically it's another mullet. So what you want to do is you want to look at where the hairline goes from being vertical here to horizontal. See, that is the length. So I want to protect all of that. This is the hair that falls in the face. That's what I'm going to cut. So I take that, and instead of pulling the hair down, I pull it up here. If I pull it down, what tends to happen is you're then point cutting it at the end. Think of it like elevation for graduation versus layering. If I pull it lower, it falls heavier. So I'm going to pull it here. So I'm just literally going to comb it straight towards me. Combing it towards me. And what I do is I angle my fingers in, my fingertips in. And I use the length right here from that side. So I know that I'm not cutting it any shorter than that. And I cut shorter on the interior, longer on the exterior. Do that again. And then you see that it face frames, but I've kept the all-important length. So doing the same thing on the opposite side. So again, establishing where the hair in the sides is and the hair that's on the face. Basically, you can see it naturally split right here. So it's in this area. So I take it from the hairline again. So I let everything that's in there fall away. And I just pull this forward. This length here is the length through here, so I don't want to take it any shorter than that. So again, you angle your fingers in for the desired angle of face framing. Now, if you want to go shorter and more aggressive with it, then you can change the angle of the fingers, or you could come in and freehand that afterwards once you've blow dried it so you can visually do it. But what you don't want is you don't want to face frame too short in relation to where the length is. If you do that, then it really opens up this area and it exposes everything. So if you've got something here that you don't want to expose, probably not a good idea to take those face framing layers too short. Keep them heavier so it closes in that area. Okay, so now that the haircut's finished, what I wanted to show you is I want to show the outline. And what you'll notice is there's this little kind of gap right here, right where the shoulder would be. And so it's really perfect for the human head because whatever sits in front of the shoulder sits in front of the shoulder. What sits behind it sits behind it. And you don't get this kind of length that flicks off the shoulder. You get it to kind of fit in nicely. So it really works perfectly with the human. And if you also think about it, the way the haircut was sectioned off, it was sectioned off perfectly to the bone structure of this mannequin. So it really fits it. So what you see now is you see instead of it, the weight dropping towards the back, you see the weight descending slightly longer towards the front. But we've kept that flow of weight that you usually see on the outline.